Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with a political move that is roiling markets this morning. President-elect Donald Trump has made his first specific threat to curb global trade flows since his election win. We get the details from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the U.S. will impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods, on top of all existing levies, beginning his first day in office. And in a separate post, the president-elect said he will impose a 25% tariff on all goods from Canada and Mexico. Trump framed these new levies as necessary to clamp down on migrants and illegal drugs flowing across borders. And the announcement came just after Trump tapped Scott Bessent to be the next U.S. Treasury Secretary. His selection was viewed as a sign of a more measured stance on tariffs. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Doug, thanks. Well, there's plenty of reaction this morning to Trump's tariff plans. Jennifer Hillman is the former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative.
I think, again, you can expect this to be very, very transactional. And I think that's part of the reason for announcing it well before he's even in office. I mean, he is clearly looking for, and I would say, Canada and Mexico to come to him with offers of things that they can do.
Former general counsel at the Office of the United States Trade Representative Jennifer Hillman made the comments on Bloomberg Insights with Haslinda Amin.
Well, Karen, the dollar rallied and Asian stocks fell as Trump's comments ratcheted up concerns about his America First policies. This morning, a China Foreign Ministry spokesperson was asked whether there are any plans for talks before Trump takes office.
I have no information to offer at this moment, but we remain open to dialogue and communication in principle.
China's foreign ministry reacting to Trump's comments. The offshore yuan weakened to a 4-month low. The Mexican peso and Canadian dollar both tumbled more than 1%.
And Nathan, Bloomberg News has learned shortly after Trump's post, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau contacted the president-elect, and the two leaders had a phone call to discuss border security and trade. Sources say Trudeau pointed out to Trump that the number of migrants who cross the Canadian border into the U.S. is minuscule compared to those who cross from Mexico.
Well, Karen, the other major news coming out of Washington this morning is from the Justice Department. Federal prosecutors have moved to drop their 2 criminal cases against President-elect Trump because he won the race. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
In the court filing, special counsel Jack Smith says the Justice Department policy requires him to abandon the case. Smith was working to hold Trump criminally accountable for efforts to subvert the 2020 election and mishandling of classified documents. Smith's team also emphasized that the move to abandon their prosecutions was not a reflection of the merits of the cases, but a recognition of the legal shield that surrounds any commander-in-chief. The team says it will continue to pursue cases against co-defendants in the classified documents case. What is not clear is the fate of the state criminal cases still pending against Trump. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. Now to the latest from the Middle East. And Israel and Hezbollah may be getting closer to a ceasefire deal, even as both sides keep firing rockets and artillery at each other. Bloomberg's Dana Kraish reports Israel's Security Cabinet is expected to vote on an agreement today.
This has come almost 2 months after negotiations have started. We were here about a month and a half ago in October when Israel agreed to a U.S. and France proposal for a ceasefire agreement, and then we saw Israel not backing this deal. So there could be some sort of, backing out of the deal by Israel. There is some opposition among Israeli officials to that deal.
But if the deal passes, Bloomberg's Dana Kraish reports the U.S. and France could announce it immediately. The latest proposal calls for a 60-day ceasefire where Hezbollah fighters would move north of the Litani River, about 19 miles from the Israeli border. Israel would reserve the right to respond if it sees Hezbollah breaking the agreement. That part of the deal has gotten significant pushback.
Well, turning back to markets now, Karen, as we mentioned, the dollar has been strengthening following Trump's latest tariff comments. Futures have turned higher as well. Stocks gained yesterday, fueled by the nomination of Scott Bessent to be Trump's Treasury Secretary. Lori Calvasina, head of U.S. equity strategy at RBC Capital Markets, remains bullish. She has a 6,600 price target for the S&P 500 next year.
The 6600 is the approximate median of those 5 different models and the outputs that they produce. There is a little bit of a range. At the low end, our valuation model, which also incorporates our earnings estimate, is getting this number a little bit below 6,200, or a PE at the end of next year. On a trailing basis, that would be about 22.7 times. On the high end, our cross-asset model is pointing to a 12.7% return on the year, which gets us well above 6,700. So there's a little bit of a range there, but that 6,600 we think is a really reasonable base case to focus on at this point.
RBC Capital's Lori Calvasina's price target of 6,600 would be about a 10% gain for the S&P 500 from current levels.
Well, we turn to the economy now, Nathan. And Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari tells Bloomberg that it is still appropriate to consider another interest rate cut at the central bank's December meeting.
This is what I'm trying to understand right now, is how much downward pressure are we putting on the economy and what is the path for inflation. But right now, knowing what I know today, still considering a 25 basis point cut in December, it's a reasonable debate for us to have.
Minneapolis Fed President Neil Kashkari and officials will receive more data both on inflation and the labor market before their December meeting. The latest update on the Fed's preferred price gauges will be released tomorrow.
In company news, Karen, Walmart is the latest business reversing course on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. The world's biggest retailer will no longer consider race and gender to boost diversity when granting supplier contracts and will stop collecting demographic data when assessing financing eligibility. Walmart joins at least 10 other companies from Deere to Boeing that have pulled back on DEI commitments in recent months as corporate America reconsiders diversity policies in the wake of last year's Supreme Court ruling banning affirmative action in college admissions.
And Nathan, the Biden administration has finalized a deal to give Intel nearly $7.9 billion in federal grants. That's the largest direct subsidy from a program to boost domestic semiconductor manufacturing. The agreement for the struggling chip maker, smaller than an earlier proposed award, means that Intel can begin receiving funds as it hits negotiated benchmarks on projects in 4 U.S. states. In another development, Bloomberg News has learned Qualcomm's interest in pursuing an acquisition of Intel has cooled. And Intel shares, they are down about 1 1/3% this morning. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. The prosecutor who oversees Wall Street stepping down. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Damian Williams will resign December 13th after 3 years. Let's get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellin.
It comes as the leadership of the office known as the Sheriff of Wall Street transitions to Donald Trump's new administration. The 44-year-old Williams has announced he plans to step down. Deputy U.S. Attorney Edward Kim will temporarily step into the top job after Williams leaves. Trump announced earlier this month that he will be nominating former SEC Chair Jay Clayton to lead the office. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
50,000 flights are set to take off nationwide today, the most of this busy holiday week. For drivers this Thanksgiving holiday, AAA says more than 70 million are set to hit the roads today. The good news, gasoline prices nationwide are at their lowest level since 2021. Republican lawmakers are calling on the Biden administration to preserve documents related to the proposed sale of U.S. Steel to Japan-based Nippon Steel. They're expressing serious concerns that politics have tainted an ongoing national security review of the deal and raising the prospect of a congressional probe. And brothers Eric and Lyle Menendez were hoping for a December hearing to plead for their release after serving 35 years for the 1989 murders of their parents. Now the next hearing in Los Angeles is scheduled for late January, so it could be many months before the brothers could be released. And the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, a tradition that started a century ago, it remains one of the few spectacles that still draws on a big audience to broadcast TV. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, airing it is going to get a lot more expensive. The paper says NBC, which has had the broadcast rights since 1953, is trying to hammer down a new deal with Macy's to keep the event on the network. A new deal would kick in next year with an average annual fee of more than $60 million. Up from around $20 million in the current contract. Global news 24 hours a day. Whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm John Tucker. This is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The rare night when all 5 New York NBA and NHL teams were in action. The hockey teams at home, the hoop teams on the road. They both had impressive victories. The Knicks were in Denver. They were coming off a loss at lowly Utah, but the Knicks against the Nuggets put on a show with 61% shooting, 45 assists, which ties the club record. The Knicks won going away 145-118 for OG Anunoby, known more for his defense. A career-high 40 points. Karl Anthony Towns scored 30. Jalen Brunson had 17 of those assists. Nets got 31 from Dennis Schroeder, beat the Warriors 128-120. At the Garden, St. Louis Blues, the day after making a coaching change, won the third period 3-0, beat the Rangers 5-2, just as the Devils won 5-2 in Newark over Nashville. First career hat trick for Nico Hischier. It was the natural hat trick. All 3 came in the second period. The Islanders at UBS lost to Detroit 4-2. In L.A., the battle of the Harbaugh brothers, and like the Super Bowl 12 years ago, John's Ravens won, beat Jim, who now coaches the Chargers, 30-23. Lamar Jackson, 2 touchdown passes, another on the ground. Derrick Henry, 140 rushing yards. After the Giants laid an egg Sunday in that lopsided loss to Tampa Bay, a couple of Giants like Dexter Lawrence and rookie Malik Neighbors both called the Giants soft. Coach Brian Daboll reacted yesterday.
I thought our guys played hard. Go back and evaluate it to tape. There was certain plays that you want back. You know, we talked about some of the missed tackles that happened. Offensively, some of the negative plays, particularly in the first half. We had 17 plays, and that created some third and longs that we didn't pick up. Didn't control the time of possession, but the guys played hard. They played with effort. Just didn't do enough.
Meanwhile, Daniel Jones, now officially an ex-Giant and a free agent, having cleared waivers. College hoops in Maui, second-ranked UConn upset in overtime by Memphis, 99-97. The Huskies came in with a record during 2024 of 31-1. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Karen and Neither.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. President-elect Donald Trump has given markets a jolt with his threat to boost tariffs on Chinese imports by 10% and 25% for goods from Canada and Mexico in an effort to stop illegal immigration and fentanyl trafficking. Michael Stroback is Chief Investment Officer at Lombard Odier.
Tariffs are messing up with the terms of trades of countries in ways that firms are not prepared for long term. Short term, therefore, you're on the losing end if you get hit by tariffs.
Well, that's Michael Stroback with Lombard Odier. Joining us now is Lindsay Newman, geopolitical risk expert and columnist for G0 Media, as we've watched the dollar strengthen and the currencies affected by these potential tariffs weaken on the news. Lindsay, good morning. Should markets see this as a threat or a promise from the president-elect?
Morning, Nathan. Thanks for having me on. There should be very little that's surprising about Trump's overnight announcements. He has been telling us throughout the campaign that he planned to rely heavily on the lever of tariffs, particularly vis-a-vis China. And as I've been saying for years, when he lays out a policy platform, when he tells you his priorities, believe him. So markets should be prepared for this. They should take it seriously. They now have 2 months before he actually steps into office to prepare. What I think he's telling here, though, Nathan, is that he's decided not just to go after China, but also he's looking very closely in his neighborhood with Canada and Mexico. And this has to telegraph that no country is likely to be immune to Trump's scrutiny, to his lens. It also has to be seen within the context of the upcoming USMCA trade agreement, which is going to be reviewed in 2026.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about how this could affect the USMCA. I mean, during the president-elect's first term, he renegotiated NAFTA. I mean, how could a tariff threat like this fit into the current trade agreement in North America?
Yeah, he took the NAFTA, which he said was the worst trade deal, and then he renegotiated the USMCA trade deal, which he seemed pleased with at the time. You hit the nail on the head here, though. This is really about a negotiation. These are really about negotiation tactics, right? We have to always remember this is Trump's way. The fact that he himself has announced this news rather than relying on Scott Bessent, his appointee, to release this news. He's telling us on Thanksgiving week over his social media platform with various capitalizations. You can't distinguish between, we have to distinguish, I should say, between the noise and the signal. The noise is the style. The signal here is that he intends to go to pursue this and use it as a negotiating tactic, including for the USMCA trade deal, which they have to review and decide whether the U.S. is going to look to unwind it. So that's going to be the end here, to build in these sort of security provisions, the immigration provisions that are priorities for the Trump administration.
Is there noise around this announcement when it comes to the progress that the Biden administration says it's made around illegal immigration as well as fentanyl trafficking, particularly with China?
There's absolutely noise here, but Trump has put this at the center of his platform. When we saw that he appointed Tom Homan to be border czar, when he's announced Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff, this is signaling that the Trump 2.0 administration plans to move quickly on these issues, on immigration, on fentanyl. I fully expect him to have a host of executive actions in addition to the ones he's referenced overnight for his signature on day one. And look, Nathan, we saw, Bloomberg reported that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saw the post on Truth Social and called up Trump. So it's working. This is the intended outcome here. These are negotiating tactics. It's an opening salvo.
So how can we expect China to negotiate, particularly given the current economic constraints it's under? Got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the response to the post where that China says they're not looking to enter into a full-blown trade war. And we have to expect, there should be more room for carve-outs, for example, for Canada and Mexico, as we saw during the Trump 1 administration. Absolutely, in Trump 2.0, Trump plans to pursue China and extend what he pursued during Trump 1.0 and also what the Biden administration carried out. We have to remember they did not roll back any of those Trump 1.0 tariffs.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.